So we're going to move on to our conversation portion, and I'd like to introduce the panel that we put together, people that have been here from the start. The museum would not exist without the dedication and spirit of all these people that have been involved from day one. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Eva, who's presently our VP. She's held a number of different roles before, from volunteer chair to being on the Vintner committee. Mészáros Magdi cannot be here with us today, I believe, who is our archivist and director of library and archives, and she's done a wonderful job. And Andrew Lazar, he's the director of exhibitions and curator, and he's the one that puts all the visuals together for these amazing exhibitions. And they've been here from day one, and they're going to share some of their stories, so please welcome them all.
I think you can start off because you're one of the first ones.
In the beginning.
In the beginning, yes.
Well, can everybody hear me?
There we go. Yeah, we get it.
So, 40 years is a long time, and we haven't changed much, have we, Andrew?
I would say for 40 years, yeah. Look at the photographs.
That's right, that was supposed to be a joke, but whatever. So, what I remember how this started is I knew the Friedrich gig, and Otto used to talk about what to do with all these beautiful older vestments or clothes that people don't wear daily, such as the dismodad, such as folk music, folk costumes. So he talked to a lot of people and a group of Hungarian men who were well known in Cleveland, such as Dr. Ferenc Somogyi, Frank Dobos, Father Nesta, who was a pastor of St. Elizabeth, Balint Géza, and a number more. By the way, these people were also on the signed articles of incorporation in the state of Ohio. That's how we started. That's how serious they were about it. So I continued to go to the meetings, and I remember very well sitting in the Friedrich's backyard in the summertime with their pool, and he was talking very seriously with these men. We realized I was almost a generation removed, so I had the utmost respect, whatever. I was younger 40 years ago. So I let them talk, and then they were very serious and said, well, we need to get money together, we need to get a place, we need to be able to collect money, whatever. And I said, well, Otto, if you're going to be collecting money, you're going to have to do bookkeeping and accounting. Who's going to do that? And he whirled around, pointed at me, and said, you. So that was the beginning, 40 years ago, and I have done their tax stuff now for 40 years. So that's how, I always say, once you get involved in the museum, you never leave. So, another person who was on there in the very beginning was Anniko Friedrich, his daughter, who did some of the publications for us, some of the publicity, but she left pretty soon afterwards. One of the drier things I have to talk about is how we went on from there. We were incorporated in Ohio, but as I said before, to get the money, etc., we had to file all those federal forms to get tax exempt. And within that tax exemption, we got the approval for anybody who gave us any financial assistance to be able to take that off of their tax forms. So we were all ready and ready to go.
Well, being that said, I first met Otto at a luncheon, a Hungarian luncheon at a church, and my mother-in-law, Kathy Kaposi, introduced me to him. She was the president of the United Hungarian Societies at the time. So Otto and I had a conversation. and he kept telling me as to what he's interested in doing, starting a museum, and to preserve and the memorabilia and the artifacts that are possibly going abandoned. And so I listened to him, and I was completely sold. So I went and followed him, and we did a lot of exhibits together over the years. The very first exhibit that we did was at St. Elizabeth in the hall that we had to renovate, mainly because it was in very dire condition, and we spent basically Otto, Joe Kroll, Jim Pavlish, Maria Friedrich, Andrea Lazar, my wife, and my mother also, and myself, cleaning it up, getting it ready for the first exhibit, which was, and I have to look at the date, it was in April, May of 1987, sorry, May of 87. Anyway, it was a very huge success. A lot of the Hungarian community came to look at the items, and if you would believe that most of the things were all borrowed. People in the community donated their items for this exhibit, and it was very welcome, since at that time we didn't have anything. And then we went on. Next year we had the second exhibit, but unfortunately in the meantime, Father Reverend Yeshta died. But we were able to continue the exhibit that we planned for September of May 1987. So what happened is that we had a very special artifact that I think Eva can tell you about that was part of that exhibit.
I'm going to move a little bit closer. I feel so far away from my fellow Hungarians.
Let me jump in for just a second. For those of you that never knew Friedrich Otto, this man was energy incarnate. So, you know, the way they described this, like, all right, it sounds reasonable, organized, and so on. No, this man was passionate. He had ideas, and he made everything sound like there are no obstacles. All obstacles can be overcome. So he would drag you along with his ideas very successfully. That was part of his gift.
Well, excuse me. So one you mentioned to our exhibit in 1987, but how that came about is that in 1985, the Diocese of Cleveland, along with some other organizations, had a display of church vestments at St. Mary's Seminary. At that time, that was off the MLK Boulevard. You know, that was a long time ago. So one of our members, Father Neshda, who was, as I said, a signer on the Articles of Incorporation, happened to be a priest, and who was there at the exhibit, and he had talked about this wonderful pluvial of Matthias Rex. That's our Magyashkidai. So we knew from this exhibit that the pluvial came from the Ellen Memorial Art Museum in Oberlin, Ohio. So at that time, which was 1985, we started pursuing this and getting in contact with the necessary people who were responsible. So what happened is we got an okay for our museum to be able to get it and to put it on display. But you have to realize that this vestment was the oldest vestment at the church's exhibit. It's from 1488. That's the time that Matthias lived. So in order to get it, they said, we have to get it. And Otto said, this was after working hours, 1986, Otto said to me, well, Eva, you can't drive out there. You need someone to go with you. And like I said, he liked to turn around and turn around, and he looked at Judy. Judy, do you remember that trip?
Yes, I do, because there too. It sounds simple. I'm like, all right, grab this box. It's like a historical artifact. It's a cake. I'm used to hauling art. I'm an artist, so, you know, yeah, toss it in the car, drive like a maniac. Who cares? Doesn't matter. It's my art. I'll make another one. This was a different animal. This is a 500-year-old artifact that suddenly I have in the trunk of my station wagon at the time. So suddenly speed limits became relevant and things like that. It's crazy.
Well, we also had to watch it because it was made of silk velvet. It had a few amethysts, pearls, gold thread filled throughout. So as an artifact, it was real valuable because it was so old, but it actually had value in it. And do you remember we had to wear
Yeah, the white gloves.
white gloves?
So archival considerations for outfits like that are very important. You don't want to get like your skin oils on it, it helps it deteriorate and things like that.
And they had it wrapped in multiple folds of tissue. We hardly found it. It took us 10 minutes to locate it. So we got it, and then after we got it, then we let one take over it because he was our curator, our very early curator, and what happened then, Bundy?
Well, actually, what happened is that we only had it for one day, and they came after the exhibit was over, and they took it away. However, you can see pictures of the quote that we have from that time. So it'll be when you go inside and look at the various aspects of the exhibits. In September of 1991, however, we had to leave St. Elizabeth's, and we had to pursue other avenues to have our exhibits at. At the time, we had the Natural History Museum. They had the Windows on World Series, and we had a weekend exhibit, and the artifact exhibit was up for a month. But the weekend exhibit included an unusual aspect, aside from the arts and crafts and children's programs, etc. We actually had a Hungarian dog breed show, and being a Natural History Museum, that was a big hit. We had the Puli, Kubas, Komondor, Vizslas, and it was a wonderful event. The other exhibit later on that we had at the Peck Center and the Crawford Auto Aviation Museum. Fortunately, Otto was, like Judy said, really looking for things to do and to be able to acquire. Well, he lived fairly close to Richmond Mall. So he talked to the manager of Richmond Mall, and we got a place over there. And we had our first opening, which I believe was in 1996. And the opening, we were fortunate to have Reverend Alex Demetsky. He loaned some of his own personal artifacts, Hungarian folk costumes, etc., and also artifacts from the museum that he had in the basement of St. Ladislaus Church in Lorraine, Ohio. And so for that exhibit, again, it was a wonderful opening. And among the various exhibits that we had was kind of neat because we had a whole multitude of things in the 4 years that we were there. But again, one of the most popular ones is that we had another Hungarian dog breed show. And this time it was in the center stage of Richmond Mall. And we had a huge crowd, and the people just loved, the Pulis that went through their tricks and maneuvers, the Kubas, the Komondors, and the Vizslas. So it was a really great event. And it was one aspect that, here again, we're not an art museum, but we're a culture museum, so we cover all aspects of things. And that was kind of the start of it, where the early exhibits, we all had to learn, especially me, on how to put on exhibits, what to do. And you don't really realize as to the magnitude of what is required. The fortunate thing is that I love to go to museums, so I do look at the various things that they do. And of course, we kind of salivate at the amount of money that they're able to exert and expend on these exhibits. And early on, we didn't have that much at all, and we had to scrape through and do the best as we could, and which many times came across fairly well. We were there at the Richmond Mall, but Judy had a very interesting exhibit that he curated, so why don't you tell them about that?
Thank you. So museums, clearly museums are an homage to the past culture, the past achievements of any given culture or any different topic. But they also function in the present. And so I put together an exhibition of about a dozen artists that are Hungarian artists, but they were mostly Hungarian-American artists, who were born in the U.S. like myself. And so it was a contemporary art show. And so I thought it was important for the museum not just to look back, but to stay current and have a dialogue with people that are making things today. So that was very rewarding and challenging for me because, like you if you don't have experienced something and the Otto says, hey, you can do that. Okay, yeah. And then you learn on the job. It's on the job training. And won the Soviets risen to the occasion. Whether I did or not, we can debate. But you know, from the early days and what you're doing today is just incredible. So.
Well, the other, do you want to keep continuing with your aspect of setting up the volunteers?
Yes, because I think what happened is that when we came into Richmond Mall, and this is going to go into a meeting I had with Monty, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read a little bit about the library. First of all, I'm so sorry that Magdalene Mészáros was not able to be here with us today. It's not very often that a museum thinks about putting books aside. However, our books, being of a different language and being here in a museum that protects its language, which is part of its culture, primary element, it was her concept to add a library to our museum. And the first library actually was conceived at St. Elizabeth of Hungary, and then got bigger and bigger and bigger until hopefully you'll go in and visit our library today, which she has a lot of material about what we're doing today. Excuse me. So I'm going to read to you what she had written, just a few sentences. I met Otto at various functions, and he spoke often of his goal of establishing a Hungarian museum. He asked me to attend a meeting where I met Bondi and Kathy Kaposi, Dr. Ferenc Somogyi, James Pavlish, and Frank Dobos. In time, Frank secured for us a regular meeting place downtown with free parking. This was greatly helping our planning. We finally found our first home for the museum at St. Elizabeth of Hungary Church. It was in the basement of the church, although a small room on the first floor was allotted to the museum. The collection grew and grew. We used all sorts of card cataloging, and finally, when we arrived at the Galleria, we went over into a computerized catalog system which Steve Saponos and Bocsai Zoltán helped set up. So since I was talking about Lovely to you and Richmond Mall that we just moved into, I remember very well when we were talking about having volunteers for the museum, because Lovely, we were meeting there and she was saying, I'd like to meet with you separately. I was kind of nervous because it was summertime. I was getting ready for a trip to Europe, as I am, at the end of this month. And I said, okay, well, what do you have in mind? And she said to me, well, I just want you to set up a set of volunteers. So, you know, like every single week they'll volunteer for 4 days, like from 11 to 3 or 10 to 3. We hadn't designated the times yet. Can you do that? I figured, why not? I mean, I'll ask a few people, put their names down, and that's it. Well, this had to be done on a weekly schedule, accessing everybody by phone. We were not all that computerized at the time. And then, like I said, once you start with the museum, you never finished. I did the volunteer chairmanship from that time all the way till 2003, when we moved down here upstairs. And then in 2003, Kathy Goulden took over until we moved downstairs. And then Monika Zula took over, and she's still working on it. So that was very well. And the volunteers, the gift shop volunteers for us, in order to stay open to you and to the public, are invaluable, because they are retired people, because people who work don't have time to come during the middle of the day and do that. So without them, we would not have been able to open our doors generally at the same time to the public that we could advertise. We have a multitude of other volunteers to help us with our programming, our websites, everything. Without them, we could not exist. We have never paid one person a penny for keeping this museum up, and we thank all of you from way back when to the present day.
All right, goodbye. No, actually, we had to leave Richmond Mall in 1998, and we had various other exhibits that we had to go to that we promoted for that we were promoting ourselves. Main company building downtown, Cleveland, I'll go through this real fast, Cleveland Playhouse, the Lake County Historical Society, which was really great because they saw our plight, and they gave us several rooms in their location, and we were there for almost a whole year. Notre Dame College, the Brazilian Library at John Carroll University. But Otto was doing his magic, and he found a place at Union Square Mall, and we opened in May of 1999. We had many exhibits over there, but the two I want to mention, the first one was the 1000th anniversary of the coronation of King Stephen. And for that, we received from Haddon a statue, a figurine of St. Stephen, as well as a replica, a porcelain replica of the crown. Both of which you can see in the museum, by the way, so be sure to go check those out. But what happened is, since the crown was on loan, there was a gentleman in the Hungarian community named Vezső Ladányi who bought it, and through the efforts, his son is continuing the legacy of having it loaned for our exhibitions. The other exhibit that I need to mention that we had there was the cooperation with the Nassau Land Research Center, and that was co-curated by Mr. Laszlo Zola, who was employed at Nassau. And this was Hungarian, or Nassau and Hungarian relations in space. After, again, we had to leave the Euclid Square Mall. But the reason this time we left is not because we had to leave monetarily, etc., but because we found a much nicer, even better place right here in the Galleria. When we opened in 2003, we were upstairs, and right around the corner behind you is where we had the museum. We had about 2.5 times the space that we have here now. And so we had several exhibits that were neat to mention, and one was the George Cosmo 20 Years Retrospective, The Spirit of Freedom, 1956, which was the 50th anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution. And for that exhibit, the entire museum was taken over by that exhibit. We put the other things that we had into storage, and we had that up for quite a few months. We had Domian Master of the Color Woodcut, which was a centennial exhibition. And then we had an exhibit that was done by George, and it was titled 430 Young Hungarian American Artists. George, you want to go into that?
Well, just real quick, there were young Hungarian artists here in Cleveland that were active in the Scout community. Kristina Lázár, János Nádas, Távor Péter, and Walter Priscilla. They were all people that I've kind of grown up with in the Scouting community, and it was cool to get together for looking past, present, future. Let's see, what else can we talk about? I think we can lead right into introducing Undi. Where are you? I caught her off guard. Andrea Mészáros was also here from day one. Before I introduce her other half, please.
We have a letter from Edie Lauer, who is a board member and also a very generous supporter. Dear founders and members of the Cleveland Hungarian Heritage Society, regrettably, I won't be with you at today's CHHS celebration. I'm attending my grandson's graduation from the University of Georgia, but I will be with you in spirit. Shortly after I moved to Cleveland in 1989, I learned about the Cleveland Hungarian Museum and met some of its members, all of whom were enthusiastic and generous in their commitment. Through the years, I became quite active in the organization. Soon I realized its unusual success was due to a group of deeply committed Hungarian Americans who knew each other for decades through participation in Scouts, work in the churches, and various organizations. What I found most impressive is that they not only devoted to the cause, they are devoted to each other. What CHH has been able to accomplish in 40 years is extraordinary. Its cultural collections, its professionally curated collections, its series of Saturday lectures, its outstanding Hungarian library, its richly stocked Hungarian shop, have made it all the center of Hungarian culture in the city of Cleveland. Congratulations and sincere thanks to all those who played a role in the creation of this cultural treasure. Best wishes for the next 40 years, Edith.
It's wonderful. And also, great support. Great appreciation.
Well, anyway, to cut this short, and because you're all getting pretty warm out there, we can go on and on, however, but we won't. Over the past 4 years, I put together 76 exhibits. This is at 77. And I want to thank all the people throughout all those years who have loaned their artifacts and objects and entrusted it to our care. And that is very much appreciated, especially early on when we didn't have that much. And what I would like to mention is that we do have audiovisual equipment that we got through a grant in 2015, and we have a 40-inch monitor, a 52-inch television, 2 touchscreen computers, and 2 touchscreen monitors. On that, there are experiences that were part of the exhibits for the last 10 years that augment the exhibit with a visual and audio presentation. And I hope that you, when you go in, check those out, besides all the ones. So, thank you.
So, I know, there's wine in there, right? Soon, soon. So, Elena, please. I'd like to introduce Elmer Mazzano. She's the endowment committee chair. He launched the endowment. He also launched the vintner dinner. And so he'll say a few words. Elena.
One, two, three, four.
Help me out there.
Thank you.
He's in finance.
Thank you. Okay. So honored guests and fellow museum supporters, this tree, which you may have noticed, represents something important. There's a saying that says someone is sitting in the shade today because someone else planted a tree a long time ago. That someone who planted the tree are the volunteers of this museum. And I think there's a number of you here, if you wish to stand up, be recognized, that would be nice. But you can just stand up on your own and people can, okay, there we go. we've got one over this
Volunteers because they're very modest.
Okay, so the people who planted that tree are the volunteers, and the people sitting here in this audience today, it's people like you, the supporters of this museum, that planted that tree so many years ago. And so today, 40 years later, we sit and enjoy the beauty of this museum. We celebrate 40 years of beauty and 40 years of generosity, all created by people like you. There are 2 indispensable elements of your generosity. One is the volunteers, and secondly, our generous donors. We're an all-volunteer organization, and that's the magic and the motivation. Success is not possible without the thousands of hours put in each year by our volunteers. There are many categories of volunteers. We have 27 directors, an operating committee, gift shop with dozens of volunteers over time, library that looks after 8,000 books and archives, exhibits, scores of exhibits over the years, lectures and programs, dozens of presenters and organizers. Individuals giving their time to financial management, publicity, fundraising, facilities, grant requests, and more. So today we salute the volunteers, the magic and the motivation of the museum, all working toward a common purpose. And we're grateful for our generous donors. 40 years ago, the museum had no money. Today, we are financially stable and look toward a bright future. This is thanks to the donors like you here today who planted the tree many years ago. Now it's time to plant another tree, and you'll be hearing more about this in the months ahead. But today we're asking you to consider contributing toward 3 needs that the museum has. The first need is a new library computer and cataloging system Our existing system is very old and no longer suited to the task. We're attempting to raise $3,500 to buy the system that we need. Our second need is a gift shop point of sale and inventory system. Our present system is slow and outdated. $3,000 would get us the updated system that we need. And our third need is for the museum collection. We have artifacts, textiles, and books. And we need some funds for the preservation and restoration of these. At the back of the museum, as you go in, you might see a book that has been restored. And you can see the effort and the beauty that has been created from a book that's over 100 years old to a modern condition. For this purpose, we are attempting to raise $15,000. This money, or any part of it, will be matched by a donor, the ZHC Trust, dollar for dollar, so you can double the power of your donation. So if you are inspired to pledge or contribute to any of these three items, any amount, please sign your name to a pledge sheet. It's in the back of the museum. There are 3 clipboards for this purpose. And you don't have to pay today. All you have to do is sign your name, the amount, and your telephone number or your email. So it's time for us to plant another tree. And thank you for considering this. And thank you for all your past support. Thanks very much. I might mention the pledge table is in the back of the museum, so there's some wine and some balika and so forth that we'll get to very shortly, and so you can make your way back there if you wish.
I think the wine and the balika serve as a lubricant for those donations. The more you drink, the more you donate. Thank you very much, Olivia. We're going to wrap it up, but I also want to thank really quickly that who has your names unmentioned is that the board, the Hungarian Museum has a board. And these folks are very professionally, and they put in a preposterous amount of hours, dedication, work, and so on and so forth. I'd also like to thank quickly the providers of food and wine, Harmonia, once again, and for all of you. And in case I didn't mention some of the organizations, the Bethlehem Foundation, Hungarian American Coalition, Ohio History Connection, Cleveland Hungarian Development Panel, and countless other organizations and individuals that help make this function. So thank you very much. And Janusz, you have something else to wrap up?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Don't worry, I've got another.
Can you hear me now? No. First, what I would like to do is ask every museum volunteer to please stand up and let me applaud you. If you stand up for a quick second, this activity have you cooled down. I'm getting some bad news. Thank you so much. God bless all of you. Thank you. And you heard the saying, you love it when a plan comes together. We were hoping to have 120 to 150 people here today. And by the grace of God, through your efforts, we have 170 people here today. God bless you. Come party with us in the event. So God bless you.